Hi everybody, Anna Sabranwitz here, your interactive storytelling coach. Hope you're having a fabulous Friday. My goodness, where did the week go? Now you know where the week went. You worked your butt off, right? All right, so today what I'm going to do is talk about interactive storytelling, but also talk about about 4 or 5 reasons why people don't perform well, and how the different strategies that I've been talking about this week, whether they were simulations, whether they were branch scenarios, whether they were interactive stories, where they actually fit and which of those reasons why people don't perform, where they actually can add the most value and address those issues. So I hope that gets you excited. It's not going to be too crazy long, but it is going to take a little bit of time to explain. So if you don't have time, don't worry. These are recorded so you can watch them after, and they're also on my YouTube channel. But in the meantime, I want to make sure everybody's here. So I'm going to make sure that I've got the chat lines open. So if you're here, say hi. I love hearing from where people are visiting from, and if you have questions about this approach and you want to learn more about basically the 30,000 foot view of where to use interactive stories, and for a whole bunch of examples, just go to elearningsecrets.com, and if somebody can put that in the comments for me, that'd be awesome. But basically there I go through my journey, how I got started on this this journey of interactive storytelling, how I basically modeled other pieces that I found useful and put them together, and now I'm using that framework to craft more interactive stories. So if that's something that interests you and you want to get started with this, definitely do that, check that out. But the other thing I suggest is, if you want to get good at interactive storytelling, and I know that not everybody can join me for a coaching program, right? Some people can, some people can't. But I think this is such a powerful strategy that I want you to be able to do this and implement this in your own work. So if this is something you do want to do, definitely go and check out my case study. But also in my stream, I've been, for the past probably month, I've been going over the strategies that you can use to integrate into your own practice so that you can craft more compelling and engaging content. All right? Okay, so hello, Lenita. Thanks for saying hi. All right, so first off, I just want us to really, maybe this is, actually I'll start off with this specific, and let me know if you faced any of these challenges, right? And I want to talk about, hopefully you guys can see that. Let me move this way. Yes, okay, all right, sorry. It's just, I'm not Leonardo, is it Da Vinci that wrote backwards? Maybe, anyways. So what prevents people from doing their best? And I always talk about people. We want to, we always talk about, when in our instructional design, we always talk about learners. And it's like people only exist as learners, right? They have this box that they fit into, but that's not true. The learners are people just like us, right? And somebody in their family gets hurt, they have a bad day, if they have they lose sleep because their child was sick, that affects their performance. So the reason I talk about people is because in order to actually connect with somebody in training, to create things that mean something to them, even when you write scenario decisions and alternatives that mean something to them, you have to think of them as people so that you can create compelling tools for them as people, and so that or options that people would choose. People with false beliefs, people with hang-ups, people with distracted attention spans because they've got like 100 things going on and notifications going on at the same time. So you have to think of these people as people, and also give them enough of that respect that, they're driving a car every day, they're making financial decisions every day, they're doing a lot of things for themselves. And so you got to treat them with the respect that if you show them a scenario where they have to make decisions, let them figure it out. Let them sweat a little, because they'll probably figure it out. It might be on the first try. That's fine. They learn from those consequences, right? So let them enjoy that process, because that's how we learn, and give them the respect to actually throw them into the situations, because that's how we learn, right? And there's a really awesome cyclical cycle, that's a good word, that shows you, and I went over it, I think a couple of days ago, of really how a scenario process, throwing people into the deep end, can actually be very conducive to how people actually naturally learn, right? Which is sweet. Okay, so let's talk about this, okay? So let's say, what prevents people from doing their best? They are unaware. And when I say they're unaware, that doesn't mean anything about their intelligence or anything about them being ignorant, nothing like that. It's that, like, here's an example. I didn't know, I got one of these cooking books, and for the longest time, when I cut an avocado in half, I would use a spoon to try and get that pit out of there, right? And then I got this book, it's called The 4-Hour Chef by Tim Ferriss, and what he showed you to do in there is you take a big knife and you go and like whack it into the seed, the pit, and then you twist and it just comes out all nice, right? And I was like, and I didn't discover that until my like late 30s. And all this time I'd been like trying to get a spoon in there and get that thing out. That doesn't mean that I was like, oh, well, I don't know any other way, and that somehow like I wasn't aware that there was a better way. And all of a sudden I was aware, and guess what? It only took that one exposure where I was like, that is so awesome. Guess which way I use now, right? But I was completely unaware that there was a better way to do that. And it never dawned on me to put the knife in there. So I was completely unaware. And that's one of the things that we have to realize is that some of our learners, we're crafting all these amazing resources for them, but they're completely unaware, one, that they even exist. They're unaware that they will help them. They unaware that it's a better way. Like my world made sense with just the spoon, right? It was fine. I was doing okay. I didn't know there was a better, awesomer way. And awesomer is a word today. All right. So the other thing is they don't care. Yes, absolutely. Every time I begin a project, every time I begin an interactive story, I think they don't care. My intent is, how can I make them care? Because I know they're bombarded with so many things. They've seen so much stuff out there that's terrible and trash. They've been bored to death with some of the amateur things that, our training department puts out. That they just don't care. They don't want to see one more thing that insults their intelligence. So I believe that this is a true issue. This is one of the reasons. And they don't need to see it because they're like, the last 10 things, it didn't help me. So I just don't care about this. I know they're just checking boxes, right? And if they don't care about me, why should I care about this stuff? Now think about that. It's pretty intense, right? How do you solve that? Then the other one is, this one's easy. They don't know. What prevents them from doing their best? They don't know. They're like, I know I could be doing better, but I really don't know where the good info is. And that could be like you searching for something on Google and finding out that, like 10,000 sources and really not having the knowledge or the background to say which one of these is actually the best strategy. So they don't know. Another one is they don't have the skills. Maybe they know. It's like, people who study medicine, but they've never actually, imagine if they never dealt with a patient. Would you trust that person, right? It's like studying instructional design, but never actually crafting a project or working with a stakeholder, right? Like stuff, but you don't actually have the skills to execute, right? So that's that's also easily solved. Now, here's another one. This one is kind of difficult. Why is it difficult? Because I think that a lot of times we, as people who are either in the training department or instructional designers, learning experience designers, anybody who designs training or training interventions, one of the things that we sometimes, by not doing the analysis, the thinking, the questions, asking some difficult questions and continuing to ask difficult questions through the project, we might figure out, we try and solve an environment issue where we can't. An environment can mean many, many things. For me, the environment is sometimes people don't do their job. And I've been in places where I'm like, oh, how come this person isn't doing their job? And they're like, well, because, and I don't know if you've ever heard of this. I was actually in a situation where somebody was distributing vaccines and they were using a truck that was basically not reliable. And also the roads to get to these places that needed the vaccines were terrible, so the truck would take forever. If only they had a motorcycle, they would have been able to just jump those things on the back of the motorcycle, deliver the vaccines, come into these, pass the roads and come back. But the way that this organization, and I guess the way this environment worked, is you had to suffer through with the truck and prove that you were stubborn enough to get those things there and do a good job, and then you'd be allowed to get your tools. Yeah. So it might be that the tools aren't available, or they're, you know, tools are issued as some sort of a privilege instead of the resource to be able to do good work. Another thing is in the environment that could be holding them back is what is being reinforced, right? Like you've faced this. You go away to a conference, you drop a couple of K, or somebody drops a couple of K, if not more, right? And you're like, oh, this was amazing. I got all these ideas, and also I got tons of free Post-it notes. You come back and nobody went to that conference. Nobody was inspired like you. And you're like, for a week you're like, no guys, really, this is going to be awesome. And then you just give up, right? Because the environment isn't conducive to you implementing these ideas, right? You can't. And it's funny because we're like, oh, we can fix that with training. No, you can't. You really can't, right? Like that takes some systematic application of changes, right? Of things that need to be addressed. The other thing, culture, right? That's up to me. That's environment. If the culture doesn't support the aha moments, like one of the things you're trying to do with your training and your interactive stories is give people these aha moments. And if the culture doesn't support people who strive for themselves, and there are environments who do that, right? There are environments where if you do a little bit more work than others, they don't like that. If you try a little bit harder, then you stick out and they're gonna, so, you're trying to create these eagles here, but they're going back to hang out with the ducks, and the ducks don't like eagles, and they'll tell them stay a duck because we don't like that. So if an organization's trying to move forward, they're like, we want our people to be winners, we want our people to be leaders, and the culture doesn't actually reinforce and support that, man, you're like pushing a rock up a hill. Like there's no silver bullet that's going to fix that, right? That's a systematic thing. So the reason I wanted to bring this up is because there are some things on this list that are going to be very difficult for you to handle if you're trying to implement scenarios, simulations, and interactive stories. But some of these things are actually 1000% things that you can address with scenarios, simulations, and interactive stories. Will a one-time thing fix everything? No. As I talk about, this is a learning journey, right? And what you're trying to do is stack the odds in your favor and in that person's favor, that things are going to stack on each other, right? This is how I stack on each other to increase the propensity that somebody's going to reach their goal, right? And it's kind of like if I craft a great interactive story, there's a base, it's a story, right? Then after I craft that solid story, I could stack the engagement up by including awesome visual communication that reinforces the story, helps people get lost in it. It's beautiful, easy to use. That's another thing, easy to use. That's another stacking on top of it saying, hey, if this is beautiful and easy to use, plus it's got a great story, that's a great experience. Another thing I could stack on top is some gamification elements like, hey, I could add a timer. Hey, I could add a karma meter. So it's the same thing. It's the same exact thing with a learning journey. The learning journey is a path. And one of the things that, I wanted to kind of show you here, this is what we've been going over the past 2 weeks, is really what that learning journey is, where people are, and how you'd support them at different parts of that journey. And not think that a single thing like you crafting an interactive story is going to start some sort of an avalanche. Because I can get people really excited about the future here, but if you don't have the next step ready as far as supporting them in the right way, like, okay, well, I'm really excited about being the top salesperson next year. I'm going for it. And okay, well, here's a 20-page manual on how to sell the DVD player. And you'd be like, really? That's it? That's what you got? So you could, like, all of this has to be thought through, right? But here is where you could have the simulations, here's where you can have the branch scenarios because people are ready and enabled. So what I'm saying is you got to think this whole thing through, and different parts of that, why people mess up fall in different parts here as well. So remember we talked about why people mess up. One of them was that the they're unaware or they don't care, right? That means right here, cold, like they just don't care, right? How do you get them inspired to go and actually check out your simulation and your scenario and actually kick butt in it? And they don't care and they're unaware. Well, you do that with an interactive story. You engage them with a story. They are looking at this character. They're seeing all these things. They're making decisions. They think they know the answers to. And what you craft that so purposefully and you're so persuasive in it that by the time they come out of that interactive story, they're ready for some tutorials. They're ready for some to engage with a coach. They're ready to engage with maybe with a community that'll support them through this journey, right? Awesome. Then if they don't know, right? If they don't know, that's one of the reasons why people stop. They lack the knowledge. Well, once they're enabled and awesome, you got to have some tutorials for them. You got to have maybe some scenarios where they can practice and figure out their gaps, like in a deeper level. Here, we're just getting them warmed up and excited about the journey. Here, we're actually starting to do some hand-holding, say, okay, here's some resources for you. I know this is where you want to get good. Okay, here's some gaps for you. Now you can zone in on the places where you need to hone your skills, right? And then we actually talked about things like they don't have the skill, right? The skills. How do you build skills? After you have the knowledge, right? I said, you can know everything you want on Wikipedia, but that doesn't mean you can implement or, just because you've been all the different painting styles, it doesn't mean you can actually paint a picture, right? You still got to do it. So one of the things that you can do here is when people want to overcome that lack of skills, well, guess what? With your scenario, you don't always have the big budget that, NASA has where you can recreate the entire space station. I think they did it underwater first, which is crazy. But what you can do with scenarios, which is very cool, is you can help people make better decisions and practice making those better decisions. Because really a skill is part decision making and part execution, right? So if you can help them with that decision making, like what should I do next based on the tools that are available to me, that is pretty dope, right? And then there are some skills that are very, very conducive to simulations, and you can do them very, very simply, which is like conversations with people, right? And conversations with people that have to do with customer service, with persuasion, with patient interactions, with counseling, with negotiation, selling things, retail, anything, right? Customers, anything. So those things are so easy to do and so easy to create simulations that put the learner in the driver's seat and make them actually practice real skills. Is that going to be the same as talking to a real person? Probably not. But if they go through 10 or 15 of those things and they're really well done, then I think that correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that would be better than having somebody come out and practice on 10 new customers and then you going, well, they're just practicing. And I'd be like, that's 10 customers. And those 10 customers, if they have a bad experience, they're going to tell like 10 more customers. So that's like, 10x of bad. So I'd rather have them practice in a simulated environment, go through as many options as possible, practice as many times as possible so they get a bit of a semblance of a process. And then I'd send them out into the world. Now, how many places actually just put people just straight up out in the world, right? Without any real supports, any real practice, more than a manual. Boo, right? So, and the software right now is so easy for you to do that. You just actually have to source practitioners so you can do this in a genuine way. I think that's where most places flop, is they try to focus on like, how can we make this sexy? Well, really the number one important thing with simulations is how can you make this super contextual and the options really valid and the conversations genuine? That's where you should be placing your emphasis, not on how can we make this look cool, right? Or do we have the right colors or branding? That really doesn't matter, right? So I hope, let's go back to our list because I think this is important, okay? And the reason I'm also stressing this is because when we use these tools, we have to know which kind of problem we're trying to solve, right? So they're unaware and they don't care. That's a place where an interactive story is going to be a winner. It's going to help you overcome this, right? They don't know. You can do a bunch of scenarios that help people figure out what their knowledge gaps are and then drive them to more resources that are those knowledge resources, right? Like tutorials or guides or whatever, right? Infographics, whatever that is, right? They don't have the skills. Simulations, branching scenarios, absolutely. This is where people can actually build the skills to make better decisions, build the skills to create better rapport with people. Absolutely awesome. Their environment, guess what? This one, probably not a place you can influence. Culture, not a place you can influence. Can you stack the odds though with some of these other things to actually influence the culture? Absolutely. And I've seen that done, where I worked on a project where the culture was that leaders only did leader activities during leadership meetings and leadership situations or one-on-one. But what this organization wanted to do is reinforce a culture where leadership was an everyday thing, an every situation thing, and anybody could be a leader. So what do? We crafted an interactive story where somebody had these beliefs, these limiting beliefs about, leadership only happens in this place. It only happens twice a year when I'm doing this review, blah, blah, blah. And what we did is we crafted a story where somebody was exposed to all these different situations and they were like, wait, I wonder if I could, take on a leadership role in this situation, even though I'm not officially the leader here, if I could have some positive influence on this particular event. And through that, they discovered that they could, through everyday interactions, actually flex their leadership muscle according to these principles that they were trying to introduce. And also that it was a positive effect, and it was something that in the future would probably be expected of everyone. So that was pretty cool. Would that one thing change the culture? Heck no, but it's a good step, right? It's stack. It's a stack. It's a whole bunch of things. You'll reach some people, you won't reach everybody, but it's a stack. And it's an expression of what needs to happen. Very persuasive, very engaging, very fun, but also maybe some people also got to care about things that they didn't care about before, right? Doesn't mean it's going to work on everybody. Doesn't mean it's the one thing you can do. There's like 25 things you can do, right? It needs to come from all over the place. But it'll kind of become this like network effect, right? Where one thing reinforces the other, and then you're like, oh man, this is our culture now because of all these things that we've put together to make this a reality. So I hope that was helpful. By the way, I just wanted to thank you for hanging out with me on your Friday afternoon or wherever you are, and actually learning about this interactive storytelling thing and scenario thing and simulation thing, because I think this is, to be honest, this is one of the most underused and underappreciated and also what's another underword I can think of? No, it's something that could be used much more effectively, and it doesn't have to be complicated. And we just have to talk to the right people and put a little bit of emphasis on, how can we help people? How can we put them as much as possible in a place where they can make better decisions? Because really that's what life's about, right? Is making good decisions. And every single moment that we have is about us being, making a decision. Whether we stay or we go, we click or we don't, right? Or we say this or we say that. And so if we can help people stack the odds of better decisions in their life, then we can have better people living in the world. I think it's a very wonderful thing to be involved in. Anyways, now, if you want to learn more about interactive storytelling at this 30,000 foot view, as mentioned before, go to elearningsecrets.com. There's a case study there. It walks you through, my journey, and also a whole bunch of other examples, and also just practical tips on how you can incorporate this into your work. And then if you have any questions that arose as a result of this or any of the other live sessions that I've been running for the past weeks and weeks and weeks, please post them in the comments. I make sure to answer them or I address them in my next live. Otherwise, have a wonderful rest of the day. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you here next week. All right? Take care, friends, and bye.